Oh hi, I'm the Heretic. If you've been following current events even at a distance, you're at least aware of the ongoing military conflicts. You no doubt also know how the US government is involved. At the time of this recording, this amounts to giving weapons and financial aid to Ukraine to fight Russia and Israel to fight, well, everybody, including themselves. Given that these are allies of the US government and these conflicts have the potential to escalate, it's no surprise that people in the US are concerned if military conscription will see a return in the United States. To clarify, yes, I know Ukraine, Russia, and Israel have military conscription. This video is framed for a Western, mostly American audience, though I hope any other viewers might get some value from it as well. Anyways, the US military consistently fails to meet recruitment goals. That's even after constantly lowering their recruitment standards. What active duty military personnel in the US do exist are increasingly unhealthy, with constantly increasing levels of obesity year after year. Should the US military need to make use of its full might, those they have on staff likely won't be combat ready. Thus, they'll need more if they want any hope of having boots on the ground, not mobility scooters. The purpose of this video is not to explore these emerging conflicts, why they are happening, who is involved, and all that stuff. There is a lot to talk about, don't get me wrong, but the story is developing at the time of this recording, and anything I say is liable to be disproven the moment the video is uploaded. But rest assured, there are other content creators sharing the news as it breaks. Instead, I want to focus on the prospect of military conscription and what it means for you, dear viewer. While I will have an America-centric focus due to me being in, well, America, a lot of the information should be applicable to everywhere where there's conscription. Now, I know my audience. Every single one of you is a true blue, America-loving, cheeseburger-inhaling, apple-pie-paking, Nikocado-maxing patriotic patriot, eager to do everything in your power to act only in the best interests of the political ruling class, for democracy! In fact, it's an insult to your national pride that the state would even insinuate that they need to enslave you into joining the military. They couldn't stop any of us from becoming pawns for the foreign policy interests of pedophiles, lawyers, and pedophile lawyers even if they wanted to. After all, we only want to put our government's interests first. What could possibly be more important to our lives than subordinating our interests and our lives to the interests of an abstraction with an organizational interest antagonistic to our own? Going to work at a white market job? Growing your own food? Reading a comic book? Literally anything else? Pfft, ridiculous. While the patriotism of you, dear viewer, need not be questioned, there are many myths you might hear about the draft in the future. These myths will come from diverse sources, such as treasonous Russian, Hamas, Iranian, Chinese traitors who selfishly value their safety or lives over the interests of the ruling class, and paid bad guy government shills. But should you find yourself in discourse with any of these disgusting cowards, I can arm you with an arsenal of information you need to combat their disingenuous lies. Firstly, there's an acronym they will likely use to communicate a certain technique for draft dodging: barbecue. The barbecue method. Barbecue being an acronym that means burn, be quiet. Some would say that the state is limited in how it would send draft notices. They claim it lacks the personnel to go door to door across hundreds of millions of homes in America. Attempting to send them via email is doomed to fail, since people can have multiple email addresses, including inactive ones. There's no way for the state to know if the intended recipient saw it or not, if the email got deleted, or even if it just went straight to spam. Sending them via phones has the same problem, and that assumes not only does everyone have a phone, but that they always have cell coverage. Same thing with the internet, actually. Thus, the state will be forced to do what they did in the Vietnam War when there was last a draft and send draft notices via the US Postal Service. Since the draft dodgers would realize this, they would argue that anyone receiving these notices could simply burn the draft notices to erase all evidence of having ever received it. Thus, we have the first step, the burn step. The assumption is that although the US Postal Service would have internal mechanisms providing confirmation of a draft notice being deposited into a mailbox, which would certainly be on a digital database, distinguishing between a successful delivery from human error becomes impossible. According to the evil, villainous, deplorable, and nefarious people obviously sympathetic towards the government the US government happens to be calling their enemies this week, the destruction of the draft notice, though very illegal and extremely unpatriotic, cannot be proven to have occurred. They can easily claim that they never received it, and any indicators that the US Postal Service has to attest otherwise are likely to be faulty. This is dead wrong. They will know exactly that you received a draft notice, so just trust me, they will, alright? They definitely have the resources to follow up on the tens of millions of people they will be sending draft notices to. Sure, this requires hiring on-the-ground agents in addition to support staff, bureaucrats, supervisors, and IT personnel to maintain the servers all of this information will be stored on, to say nothing of the risk of all that data being manipulated or deleted by third-party hackers, conscientious objectors, or even simple data corruption. But this is the US government we're talking about. They can totally pull all those resources out to enforce their draft notices while simultaneously fighting a freaking war thousands of miles away while simultaneously paying interest on a gigantic debt near the end of the debt cycle. The state will also have the resources to enforce legislative fiat on any draft dodgers, as well as the capacity to prosecute and imprison them, so watch out! The resources that the state will definitely have means that draft dodgers definitely will be caught, so dodging your patriotic duty to be traumatized, maimed, and murdered pointlessly thousands of miles away from home is doomed to fail. So do not burn any draft notices, and do not advise others to burn their draft notices either. Similarly, do not do what draft dodgers did in the Vietnam War, like getting fake doctor's notes or simply refusing to show up. The US government has a way stronger ability to enforce legislative fiat than they did before the complete debasement of the US dollar, or the multitudes of financial crises, or the opium and fentanyl epidemics, or the mass shutdowns and defundings of police departments in towns and cities across America, including in many places where cities simply do not have the resources to prosecute most crimes. The non-enforcement of legislation meaning that any military drafts cannot be enforced. But the state totally has the resources, you guys, I promise. However, those that want to dodge the draft will note that burning draft notices alone isn't enough for the anti-nation bad people anarchists. Although they claim that the burning is a good first step, they foolishly and selfishly seek to mitigate the risk of being caught. For them, the second step of the barbecue method is the most important one: be quiet. If one does receive a draft notice and destroy all evidence of having received one, risk mitigation demands they tell nobody of having received it. Do not post a video on TikTok of destroying your draft notice, even in protest. Don't even make the video. Don't tell your coworkers. Don't tell members of your network. Even if you trust them completely, you can't trust who might be eavesdropping on your conversations, especially if they're online. Would-be draft dodgers, well advised enough to take any steps necessary to mitigate the risk of the state identifying them, is, well, it's very simple. Just don't do a thing. If you're trying to dodge the draft, just be quiet. At least that's how the reasoning goes. After all, if the state's resources are as spread as thin as they are, not only unable to follow up on people not paying income taxes, but for prosecuting a war? Well, think about it. Even if only 1% of drafted Americans took steps to avoid having to fulfill their patriotic duty to die pointlessly, that's still hundreds of thousands of people, potentially millions. The cost of the bureaucratic nightmare for investigating all of these cases of draft dodging would be catastrophic for the war effort, to say nothing of the costs for courts and prisons. But this is also wrong because we know the state is going to encourage people to post draft protest videos on social media by manipulating the algorithms to promote protest content as a form of controlled opposition. But this totally isn't propaganda, you guys, because America never uses propaganda. Propaganda and manipulation of social media to manufacture peer pressure is only done by bad guy countries, and America is the goodest good guy country there is. It's much better to say America will gently and incessantly persuade people to just upload themselves on social media destroying their draft cards so you can become popular on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. People's feeds will be filled with draft card destruction protest videos. Everybody knows young people are a hive mind, incapable of any independent thought or action outside of what is trendy at the moment. All the state needs to do is manufacture a false trend and watch the biometric data roll in. It's a flawless plan that in no way is thwarted by people exercising basic discretion and self-control. So, obviously, nobody in this audience will ever use these techniques to avoid a military draft. After all, it would be illegal to avoid fulfilling your civic duty. But it should effectively demonstrate how, well, ineffective, using discretion to mitigate one's risk really is. Would-be draft dodgers should become so full of despair, they'll have no choice but to accept being indentured into servitude to the US government as cannon fodder. What great American heroes! Thus, it stands to reason any anti-political activity is discouraged through demoralization. It's the only means the state has for stopping people from organizing around them or developing techniques and technology that completely undermines their organizational structure. It's our duty to keep those filthy, disgusting, nasty, evil, horrible, insert negative adjective here, draft dodgers demoralized. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Hold on, heretic. I'm too young, too old, or have some sort of chronic mental or physical condition that would compromise my ability to effectively serve in the military. Even if I am drafted, I would be disqualified from service the moment they looked at my records, which does include age and stuff. Well, fret not. As any future hypothetical war drags on, the net of draftable candidates will undoubtedly widen, as the number of kids turning 18 every year will be insufficient to replenish military losses. So, like Germany at the tail end of World War II, at the twilight of their empire, the US will undoubtedly lower its military qualification standards such that becoming a mindless murder machine for the political interest of your overlords will no longer be a privilege reserved for able-bodied young adults. Not to insinuate that the American empire is in its twilight. Anyone who says that just hates freedom and loves whatever country the US happens to be fighting this week. Even if you aren't eligible to be drafted yet, you still have a great and honorable service you can perform for the political class. You will no doubt be encountering un-American draft dodgers in the near future. Keep everything I just said in mind, because the most important thing you can do, short of enlisting, is to fill your peers with that sense of hopelessness and despair regarding future wars and the draft, such that their ability to coordinate and network is completely compromised. Remind them that they are impotent in avoiding the draft. Let them know the US government definitely has the resources to identify, capture, and conscript or imprison literally millions of people while simultaneously prosecuting total war and maintaining possible martial law. Remind them that the endless deluge of news and media content reinforcing this exact claim that will no doubt exist when a war actually breaks out is definitely 100% truthful and not at all propaganda, like it was during the COVID pandemic or like it is now with the Israeli situation. That helplessness you will be inculcating will dissuade your peers from seeking techniques that would save them from enslavement by the all-powerful and definitely not stretched thin United States government. It's for their own good, after all, and not at all a demonstration of the actual impotence the United States government conceals by projecting an image of strength. So, hopefully, you'll know to do your duty and encourage others to refuse the call of duty. Remember, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask how far and how hard your country is willing to shove it up your ass, because I can promise you the answer is yes. Questions? Comments? Critique? Are you a good, young, patriotic citizen willing to do everything they can for this country? Leave a comment below. You know all the rest, and proprietary media corporations hate us, so go do the thing.